began our conversations last night with the dinner talks, a format that was launched last year and this year organized by Kosovo Civic Alternative with the support of European Institute for Peace. Over time, it has become an established space for thoughtful and open discussion among civil society, international community, and policymakers. Yesterday's exchange set the perfect tone for today's discussions.
New World Disorder, Disinformation, Distrust, and the Dismantling of Democratic Norms brings together voices not only from the Western Balkans, but also from Europe and beyond. And throughout this day, we will have a few panel discussions throughout which we will confront how disinformation and polarization can threaten democracy, but we will also try to find ways in how we can rebuild trust and civic resilience.
Before we begin, we would like to express our thankfulness for our partners and donors whose continued support makes this summit possible. And those are the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, National Endowment for Democracy, CMI, Marti Ahtisaari Peace Foundation, European Peacebuilding Liaison Office, Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, and UN Women, who are, by the way, organizing a side event on the margins of this year's KPDS dedicated to women, peace, and security agenda.
So thank you very much to our sponsors for standing behind dialogue, peace building, and democratic cooperation. Your support has enabled us to organize the KPDS Summit for the 4th year in a row.
To officially open the summit, please join us in welcoming executive directors of 3 main organizations behind KPDS. Joanna Radosavljević from New Social Initiative, Mentor Brajoli from Kosovo Center for Security Studies, and Ardi Bakia, the Executive Director of Disman.
Well, Your Excellencies, distinguished representatives of the international community, colleagues from the civil society and academia, esteemed guests from Kosovo, the region, and abroad, it is my great pleasure and honor to welcome you to the 4th Annual Kosovo Peace and Democracy Summit. Thank you for traveling from near and far and for being here with us today. Unfortunately, for the 4th year in a row, I stand before you and I must admit that things have only gotten worse. And indeed, this year's summit was truly the most difficult one to pull off, not just because of the financial uncertainties that struck the civil society, but because of the exhaustion of the good guys and the lack of an end in sight to what we see as a good fight. Regardless, in a world that perverts peace through strength into the peace through strength of unilateral blackmail, we still try to persevere as a single firefly, keeping the spark of conversation alive in the dark of the night. We are being swatted away, but our size is also our strength. We're small, but fast and agile. We escape. We find cover. We find small places where our light, our ideas, shine a bit brighter. And those spaces are usually provided and our light amplified by our partners in the diplomatic community. And I want to thank them for it. The fruits of our cooperation are not many, but they are sweet. And they give us the energy to look past the constant exhaustion of watching things become more disorderly each day. Therefore, I invite you to help us out today. Stick with us through the panel sessions as we try to bring order into our thoughts about the skyrocketing entropy that is before us and see the pathway to a much-needed restart of equilibrium. Thank you.
Dear participants, I'll try not to echo what my colleagues have said before. However, I just want to thank also on behalf of KCSS, thank you very much for coming, and also to express some gratitude of panelists, special guests, especially Ambassador Oral, but also Stephen Hines, who have been generously supporting our organizations in not only organizing KPJS, but also on the other efforts, and also Andrea, who will help, who will come here and make to hear from her this insights regarding the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue. I want to express our thanks also to all panelists and all participants here, but also to express gratitude to European Peace Building Today's Notice and to CMI, who have joined forces in this edition of KPDS, enabling us to make this event much bigger than we initially anticipated. And of course, like I want to express gratitude to donors, NED, RDF Fund. This year and also last year we had also generous support from the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. So we thank also them for the support that they have provided towards us. Let me say also some words regarding the event. As you know, this year's topic is focused on disinformation, distrust, and dismantling of democratic norms. As a KCSS, like we have been working for years now tirelessly to contribute on providing rational dialogue regarding the security challenge that our region is facing, and we are hoping that this event will help to enrich this dialogue between civil society actors, but also with the presence of experts and also policymakers throughout Europe that are present here. We will be able to discuss topics that we were not able to hear very often, and especially I want to express this gratitude that have in mind that we are living in a more challenging environment. These opportunities that enables us to meet, but let's use this as opportunity for networking and also exchange, and through it, let's hope that we are going to have more interconnection and more joint efforts to keep our communication with one another and continue this dialogue that we want to promote through Peace and Democracy Summit. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, I'm happy to see you all here. Thank you for coming to the 4th edition of Kosovo Peace and Democracy Summit. I'd like to, since incidentally this would be my last KBS as an executive director of Bunker, I'd like to say some thoughts with, let's say, with some more freedom than I would usually. So every year we gather. It's the 4th year that we gather here with a stubborn belief that dialogue still matters, and that critical thinking is worth defending, and that societies like ours, which are small, fragile, but somehow fiercely resilient, don't have to accept the scripts that are written for them by others. This year's theme, the New World Disorder, captures the moment with some eerie accuracy, I would say. We're living in an age where entire political realities are produced through narrative engineering, where trust is not just eroded slowly, but completely shattered. And democratic norms, which have once been taken for granted in this region, now feel negotiable and provisional. We're living through a moment when disinformation, especially, has become a governing tool and not just a propaganda tactic. When narratives don't describe reality but replace it, and when democratic norms aren't challenged openly, they're quietly hollowed out. By the time the structure collapses, people insist it happened suddenly. It never does. For the Western Balkans, this is not an abstraction. and the region has slipped into old anxieties, ethnic myth-making, performative nationalism, frozen conflicts that keep reinventing themselves, and a political class which is very happy and all too comfortable to exploit fear. At the same time, global actors, state and non-state, have discovered that the Balkans is an ideal venue, an ideal testing ground for information warfare. The targeting is sophisticated, cheap, and relentless. And the damage is massive. But credibility, I would say, matters more. Institutions without credibility cannot enforce norms, and so is true for media as well. And dialogue like this, without credibility, cannot shape any type of peace. And this is where our work begins. And I would say that the panels ahead of us will explore this problem very well. If what I said so far sounds bleak, I think it's because during our experience here and during our work with our colleagues, we've grown allergic to naming problems clearly. But clarity is the beginning of agency, I would say. And also, this summit, since it's very exceptional, is not about curated optimism, and its value lies in its willingness to say the things that official narratives avoid or deny. So I'd just like to say at the end that this initiative has happened because of stubbornness of my colleagues from KCSS and NSI, and I wish it continues with the same fierce courage and determination. Thank you for being here, and I'm glad to see you, and have a wonderful event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Johanna, Mentor, and Bardi. We will now have the pleasure of welcoming His Excellency Ambassador Ivo Oraf, who is the head of the EU office in Kosovo and also EU Special Representative. We have the pleasure of having Ambassador Oraf for the second year at KPDS. He has more than 3 decades, experience in diplomacy, so we're really looking forward to hearing your remarks. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Good morning, distinguished colleagues, representatives of civil society, members of media, dear friends, partners. Across Kosovo and the wider region, societies are navigating through unprecedented challenges. Disinformation, polarization, and attacks on democratic norms threaten the foundations of trust and civic engagement. This is why we are here gathering today at Kosovo Peace and Democracy Summit, an opportunity to act together. I want to thank our hosts, Joanna Radosavljevic, Bardi Pakia, and Mentor Raioli, for bringing us together at this very critical moment. The title of today's conference could have been unimaginable 10 years ago, but we are here today. Across Europe and beyond, disinformation seeks to weaken trust in institutions, polarize societies, and exploit divisions. These challenges cross borders, and Kosovo is not exception here. According to the findings of our partner, hybrid.info, disinformation and FIMI are highly salient, particularly around elections and security issues. According to the findings, disinformation in Albanian language spreads mostly through social media, while disinformation in Serbian language is more often embodied in traditional media with narratives frequently echoing Russian disinformation, particularly on political and security issues. As a result, Kosovo's information space remains vulnerable to manipulation and external interference. Research by our partner, like BIRN and Democracy Plus, shows that critical thinking and source verification are not systematically taught in schools or integrated into public education, leaving citizens highly exposed to manipulation and disinformation. And Kosovo ranks 40th among 41 countries at the European Media Literacy Index, reflecting weak institutional awareness and limited investment in media education. Fact-checking capacities remain limited, and no comprehensive national strategy on media literacy has been adopted. They demand not only vigilance, but confident, united, and values-driven response, grounded in democratic principles, transparency, and the rule of law. Civil society stands in front line of this effort. Your work, whether in independent journalism, community engagement, research, or fact-checking, has been essential in strengthening democratic culture, holding institutions accountable, and building bridges between communities. And the European Union is proud to be your partner in this mission. We will continue to support vibrant, resilient civil society capable of resisting manipulation, safeguarding democratic norms, and promoting informed public debate. Kosovo's European path depends on these foundations. Progress in governance and the rule of law, transparency and civic participation remains central for the Kosovo's European Union's perspective. These reforms are not simply technical requirements. They are the backbone of democratic, inclusive and prosperous society. The European Union commitment to the EU enlargement has indeed faced moments of strain. Enlargement is not only a policy, it is a strategic investment in stability, security and prosperity for the entire continent. And the progress with Albania and Montenegro towards membership demonstrates that the European perspective of the Western Balkans is real, credible and achievable. For the rest of the Western Balkans, the opportunity is there, but it requires serious commitment. In this context, Kosovo's path is particularly significant. The European Union has been clear, progress depends not only on domestic reforms, but also on advancement of the European Union facilitated dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina. It requires resolving bilateral disputes, strengthening democratic institutions, protecting media freedom, ensuring the rule of law, and preserving and strengthening Kosovo's multi-ethnic character. These are not hurdles set by the European Union. They are foundations for a stable and prosperous future. Kosovo has made significant progress, but to move forward, we need the government here as soon as possible. We need a partner. The European Union must remain engaged, consistent and supportive, and we are. Our commitment to the region has deepened, not weakened. The European Union remains committed to supporting Kosovo on this journey politically, financially and through sustained engagement with institutions and communities alike. For example, our programs supporting media literacy, judicial reform and cross-community dialogue are designed to reinforce the very democratic resilience this summit seeks to strengthen. At the regional level, dialogue and cooperation are indispensable. Peace building is not an abstract concept. It is the daily work of building trust, reducing tensions, and creating opportunities for all citizens. The European Union will continue to encourage and support initiatives that bring stakeholders together, reduce mistrust, and contribute to long-term stability. In this context, civil society is irreplaceable. Your voice brings depth, legitimacy, and accountability to regional dialogue, ensuring that progress is both meaningful and sustainable. Today is both an opportunity to reflect and call for action. The challenges of disinformation, polarization, and democratic backsliding are serious, but they are not impossible to overcome. Together, with open conversation, courageous leadership, and responsible public engagement, we can strengthen democratic resilience and preserve the European future that people of Kosovo overwhelmingly aspire to. I wish you productive discussion over the next 2 days, and I look forward of hearing about the insights, your recommendations, and above all, your vision for a stable, democratic, and European Kosovo. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your insightful remarks and for the EU's continued engagement in supporting peace and democratic progress in Kosovo and the Western Balkans. Before I announce the next speaker, I just want to thank all of you who made it on time despite obstacles related to traffic. We will now continue with a keynote address from Mr. Stephen Hines, President and CEO of the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. The fund has been a founding supporter of KPDS, consistently promoting dialogue, peace building, and democratic cooperations across the region.
Good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to see you all here. I feel, when I'm in this space with all of you, I feel very much at home. And I really appreciate the courage and the conviction of everybody who's participating in this conference. Ambassador, thank you for your remarks. I have to say that what you said and what I'm going to say are very, very similar. So I hope you're not going to be bored by this, but we'll do our best to perhaps offer somewhat of a different perspective. It really is an honor to be with you. I've been coming to Kosovo since 2003, and I've seen enormous progress in this country, and I've made many, many friendships, and I've seen extraordinary work by civil society and by citizens themselves to create the kind of country that Kosovo should be and can be and will be. And I want to thank our partners who have organized the Peace and Democracy Summit. And you've heard from their leaders this morning, the New Social Initiative, a very important and courageous civil society organization. The Kosovar Center for Security Studies, a terrific local think tank. And Espunker, which is a very active and creative organization. And I want to thank each of these organizers for being such good partners with each other and with the rest of civil society in this country. You know, the title of this year's gathering, New World Disorder, Disinformation, Distrust, and Dismantling of Democratic Norms, could not be more fitting, unfortunately. Around the world, we are witnessing a storm of disruption that threatens the very foundations of democratic societies. In your booklet, there's an introductory paragraph describing these conditions, which could have been written about my own country. We too are experiencing serious democratic backsliding, the shrinking of civic space, illiberal and autocratic practices and tactics, the effects of geopolitical volatility, some of which my country is helping to contribute to, and the distorting power of digital disinformation. Here in the Balkans, global headwinds have collided with long entrenched and unresolved regional tensions, deep social and political polarization, and a rising tide of disinformation that distorts the truth and corrodes trust. And yet, by coming together today, we all affirm something vital, that even in this world new disorder, there remains a moral order worth defending and a political order worth reimagining. We must remember that democracy is never finished, never fixed. It must be renewed and reinvented generation by generation, and sometimes moment by moment. What we are facing is not simply a crisis of institutions, but a crisis of confidence, a collapse of shared belief that democracy can deliver justice, dignity, and opportunity. That is why gatherings like KPSD matter so very much, because democracy does not defend itself. It depends on us, on citizens, on journalists, academics, activists, educators, funders, and policymakers working together to resolve crises, to solve problems, to restore trust, and rebuild the kind of connective tissue in our societies. My first visit, as I said here, was in April of 2003, and it was clear even then that civil society was the kind of heartbeat of this country's democracy. That the years ahead from that period were going to be tough. Everybody knew it, and of course they have been. But civil society also knew the important, essential role that they were called upon to play in the democratic project of Kosovo. And in these years since, civil society organizations working with local activists and courageous individuals have done more than deliver needed services or advocate for essential reforms. They have nurtured the habits of citizenship, what de Tocqueville called the habits of the heart, that are essential for vibrant democracy. They have built bridges across divides, given voice to the voiceless, and demanded accountability from those in power. And they have done this work not in easy times, but in profoundly difficult ones, often facing shrinking civic spaces, limited resources, and rising hostility from those who fear the transparency and inclusive participation that genuine democracy requires. It is no exaggeration to say that without civil society, democracy in Kosovo would be far, far weaker. And without civil society, there can be no peace tomorrow. That is why, as an international partner, RBF has long believed that the path to peace and democracy begins not only in the negotiation rooms or in the capital cities, but in communities, in the courage of citizens and the networks of trust they build. For more than 2 decades, we have stood with those who have chosen dialogue over division, truth over propaganda, and participation over exclusion or apathy. The rise of disinformation and narrative warfare, including nationalist narratives, poses one of the most insidious threats to this work. We are all familiar with the tactics: distortion, manipulation, and outright fabrication. But the deeper danger is what disinformation leaves behind in society, a society where people no longer what to believe or whom to believe, a society where every truth seems relative and every disagreement becomes existential. As Hannah Arendt wrote, if everybody always lies to you, the consequence is not that you believe the lies, it's that nobody believes anything any longer. In such an environment, democracy is absolutely in peril, because democracy depends on a basic level of shared reality. It depends on trust, trust in facts, trust in institutions, and trust in one another. Civil society has a unique role, probably the most important role, in building trust. By creating spaces like this for dialogue and debate and discussion, by defending independent media, by teaching digital literacy, by modeling transparency, civil society can help reweave the social fabric that disinformation works to tear apart. There is one truth we must continue to say out loud, even when it is difficult. There is no lasting peace in Kosovo or the Western Balkans without genuine dialogue between Albanians and Serbs. There is simply no alternative. This dialogue cannot be reduced to negotiations between governments or technical agreements between Brussels and Belgrade. These are necessary for sure, but peace that lives only on paper is peace that will not endure. True peace is made in the daily encounters between neighbors, colleagues, classmates, and communities. It is made in the willingness to listen with empathy to another person's story and recognize that their dignity is bound up in your own. History cannot be rewritten, but it can be transcended. And that process of transcendence begins with dialogue, with the humility to understand and the courage to forgive. Every genuine reconciliation process in the world, from South Africa to Northern Ireland, has rested on this foundation: dialogue that is inclusive, sustained, and human. The Balkans is a region of intertwined destinies. There's no escaping it. No country can succeed in isolation. The health of democracy in one state affects the health of democracy in all. And economic prosperity depends on regional economic integration. That is why regional cooperation and people-to-people engagement are so vitally important. Cross-border initiatives, whether among journalists, youth groups, women's networks, businesses, or municipalities, are not simply nice to have. They are strategic investments in shared stability and prosperity. In a world increasingly defined by fragmentation, the Western Balkans can offer a different story. One of interconnection, cooperation, and local ownership of peace, rather than one of persistent conflict and hatred. I believe that the region's future belongs not to those who inflame old grievances, but to those who build common ground. The promise of European integration remains a bright horizon, but it will only be realized if the region can demonstrate that it can cooperate across borders, communities, and narratives. At the same time, international partners must not turn away. We know that global attention is stretched thin, from Ukraine to the Middle East, to domestic divisions and democracies everywhere. However, disengagement from the Western Balkans comes at a very serious cost. Durable peace and resilient democracy are not inevitable. They are built through sacrifice, patient diplomacy, and sustained international support. To retreat now would be to risk the erosion of hard-won gains. Solidarity is not a one-time act. It is a continuous commitment, a recognition that the struggle for democracy in Kosovo, in Serbia, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and elsewhere in the region is part of a global struggle for the kind of world we all want to live in, a world of dignity, pluralism, and freedom. I know that for many in civil society, fatigue is real. We all feel it. The space for action feels smaller, and the threats more sophisticated, and the resources seem increasingly scarce. But the history of Kosovo and the Balkans reminds us that resilience is written into the DNA of this region. Time and again, people here have rebuilt from ashes, turned division into dialogue, and refused to surrender to despair. The same resilience is needed again now, and not just to defend democracy, but to reimagine it, to build a democracy that is both participatory and fully representative, a democracy that values diversity as a source of strength, not division, a democracy that recognizes interconnectedness, not only across ethnic lines, but across generations, across borders, and across the widening gap between citizens and institutions. As we look ahead, let us remember that the struggle for democracy and peace in the Balkans is not a story of victims and heroes, of outsiders and insiders. It is a shared story, a story still being written by all of us in this room. There are no shortcuts, and there are no substitutes for dialogue, cooperation, and trust. But there is also no more noble work that we could do. The task for each of us in our own way is to ensure that amid the noise of disinformation and the fatigue of disorder, the voice of democracy continues to be heard. Because in the end, democracy is not just about elections. It is about the culture we seek to create in our society. It is about how we relate to each other. It's about how we solve problems, whether it's in our families, or at the community level, or at the national level, or internationally. Democracy is a way of living, not just a set of processes and institutions. That is also the essence of peace. It's the essence of democracy, and it is the legacy that we owe to the next generation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Heinz, for delivering such a dedicated speech to this year's KPDS. That included certainly some messages and lessons that we will take away, both individually and collectively, and we'll make good use of them, just like we're doing with your extended support for KPDS. So now we will announce the first one-on-one discussion, which will tackle the topic, can the Kosovo-Serbia normalization dialogue survive in a context shaped by narrative warfare and ambiguity?
In this, joining us is Andreas Homšek, political advisor to the European Union Special Representative for the Belgian-Christian dialogue, in conversation with Senan Shabovic, senior advisor at European Institute for Peace. Please join us in welcoming them to the stage.
We are used to the hot seat in the dialogue, but it's a dialogue.
Okay, so we go straight into it. Good morning from me too. Greetings. Welcome to the first panel of the Kosovo Peace and Democracy Summit. It takes place, as you can see, in the form of a one-on-one conversation with our distinguished guest, Andrea Slomšek, who works as a political advisor with the USR Peter Sorensen. Good morning, Andrea. Welcome to Pristina. Welcome to the summit. Thanks for doing this. My name is Senad Šabović. I'm a senior advisor with the European Institute of Peace, an independent organization based in Brussels, whose primary focus in the Balkans is precisely on the Kosovo-Serbian normalization dialogue. I will be asking questions, looking forward to hear perspectives of Andrea Slomšek on the central topic of our panel, which is, can the dialogue survive? Can the Kosovo-Serbian normalization dialogue survive in the context increasingly shaped by narrative warfare and ambiguity? Prior to delving into it, a point of order, we anticipated something like up to 30 minutes for this panel to accommodate a very rich KPDS agenda, and unfortunately we can't take any questions from the panel, but rest assured that I've prepared a good combination of questions that cover all the topics that may interest us. So again, on behalf of KPDS, thank you for joining us. Good morning again. Let's begin with the questions. I guess the first one is the most obvious, perhaps the most general. What is the state of play in the dialogue? What are the prospects for 2026? What has been the focus of USR and his team at the moment, and can we expect any breakthroughs anytime soon?
Thank you very much for having me here. I feel really privileged. Thank you, organizers, for organizing this important event. As you may know, USR Sorensen could not be here today, so I'm here on his behalf. And we are really thankful for organizers to put the dialogue that's also a central work of EU in the region here in one of your one-on-one sessions. Let me begin with the state of play. The dialogue remains very much active, but as USR Sorensen often says, a normalization is not, it's a continuous process. It's not just one meeting, it's not a single moment. The political environment has been very challenging, but engagement has remained steady, structured and very much aligned with the mandate that EU member states entrusted to the USR. Since the beginning of his mandate, USR met with political representatives of both sides more than 66 times. He held two extensive trilateral sessions with the chief negotiators in Brussels, and his team continues to run nearly weekly technical level meetings on the ground. This sustained engagement is not just symbolic. It has kept communication channels open, it prevented bigger tensions, especially this summer, and ensured that both parties remain focused on the dialogue obligations and their commitments. We see daily impact. People, vehicles and goods move freely across 6 common crossing points between Kosovo and Serbia, and cooperation in practical areas continues despite political headwinds. You asked about the prospects in 2026. I see cautious optimism. On one hand, we have the EU enlargement that remains driving incentive for both Kosovo and Serbia. We can see that it shifted in a much higher gear. On the other hand, we have, of course, the European path for both Kosovo and Serbia that goes through the normalization process led by the EU dialogue, EU facilitated dialogue. here the most important is, of course, the 2023 agreement on the path to normalization and its implementation annex. It's legally binding for both sides and remains the main framework. We see that the engagement and commitment from Kosovo and Serbia definitely provides a stable foundation. But what will be needed is the progress that will need political will, the de-escalation and constant delivery on the obligations. Main focus of our work, I could put it in 4 priorities. It's the implementation of Ohrid as the first one. The second one is sustained de-escalation, economic normalization, and the fourth, our humanitarian agenda. When we speak about the implementation of Ohrid agreement, in the last 9 months, USR has been working together with both parties, with chief negotiators mainly, to clarify what are the obligations and what is needed to be prepared for the first high-level meeting. As you probably recall, when HRVP Kallas was visiting Belgrade and Pristina in May, she invited both sides to prepare for the high-level meeting. She's ready to hold it as soon as political circumstances allow it. Advancing on the implementation is an essence. It shows credibility path for both sides. It shows credibility for EU, and of course it's a strong message for people that the EU path, the EU perspective is clear. The sustained escalation in recent developments are very positive, meaning seeing the participation in the February elections, peaceful local election this autumn, and we're also hoping that in the same way also the elections in December will go. This gives us space to correct the 2022 institutional withdrawal. Reintegration has to move step by step, and essentially institutions vacant in 2022 must be reintegrated so that citizens have functioning representative institutions they can rely on. Economic normalization is something that we like to present some numbers to it, to show that IBM, so-called integrated border boundary management that was negotiated under the dialogue is really working. We have re-established technical formats meetings after 7 years. They are important because we are helping both sides to manage daily operations on the crossing points, and now I'm coming to the numbers showing that it does work and that there is a cooperation on technical level. This summer alone, there was 1.7 million people crossing the crossing points. That means 500,000 vehicles freely without any disruption. Last month, more than 17,500 trucks crossed 6-7 points, meaning that the dialogue has been delivering for the region. Why I'm making this point on the economic normalization? Because investors do watch the political risk closely, and normalization is the strongest signal to unlock for more investments. EU is here standing first in line, I can say, with the growth plan of 6 billion euros for the region. Out of it, 880 million prepared for Kosovo. As it was said this morning already, there are a few steps that needs to be done. We need strong institutions in place, de-escalation tensions to be continued, and other steps need to be done to unlock the growth plan. Just to touch the humanitarian imperative, this is the case of missing persons. Under the 2023 declaration, both parties committed to the EU Charter Joint Commission to support the ICRC Red Cross work, to remove political obstacles and to help locate almost 1,600 names still unaccounted for from the conflict. This is moral, humanitarian and reconciliation priority.
Quite impressive. Doesn't help me for my second question, but still we appreciate that it's quite busy. Let's say on the inside, we appreciate the efforts of Mr. Sorensen and the team. Still, to us from the outside, year 2025 looks a lot like another lost year, let's say, but definitely this one for the dialogue with the prolonged institutional crisis in Kosovo and the student-led protests in Belgrade. We didn't see the usual or previously usual frequency. We've seen beyond 2025 in the past how electoral cycles and perhaps other forms of political disturbance have delayed the intensity, delayed implementation of the dialogue. So is there something that can be done about this? Is there a way to ensure, let's say, a high frequency, higher intensity of the dialogue for years such as 2025, especially looking 2026 and not seeing anything concrete that will get us out of the current context?
This is definitely most often question we get. Yes, cannot deny. The political environment has been very challenging for the dialogue, both in Kosovo and Serbia, as you said. But if we look into it from another perspective, EU facilitated process continues. There is the continuity. We kept technical day-to-day arrangements running. We maintained political contacts and channels open, as I mentioned before, during this summer. There were more than 16 tete-a-tete arrests, there were deportations, there was opening of a new bridge in Mitrovica, something that in previous years could bring, or as we could see, it did bring dialogue in the crisis mode. This year it was different. We have been working and preparing for decisions that have to be taken on political level at the first feasible high-level meeting with the HRVP. So I'm very assured to say no time has been lost this year.
Okay, so sure. Perhaps kind of along the same theme and something that on the face of it sounds a little silly, but the question is how much of a priority is the dialogue really for the EU? It is obvious on the face of it, it is high priority, but it's also natural for Brussels and for the member states to feel discouraged after, let's say again, years like 2025, after some periods of stagnation. So is there anything more that the EU can do to ensure, again, a higher frequency and a higher commitment to implementation? And let's say on the flip side, seeing how the dialogue is a major dimension of EU accession for both Kosovo and Serbia. What's your message in that regard to Kosovo and Serbia governments and the people? Can the dialogue really boost our chances for EU integration?
Yes, dialogue is high on the EU agenda. For Brussels, the dialogue is not optional. We could hear it today. There is no alternative to it. That's true. That's also our message. For EU, it is also central for regional stability and its EU enlargement policy. The USR mandate makes it very clear. His mandate is linked to the normalization process of relations of both Kosovo and Serbia, and as if you look into his mandate, there is a clear EU path, not just in our EU mandates, but EU has been called and our role has been given in a way also from the international community. Let's not forget the UN 2010 welcoming EU to take over the peace process. where EU is seen as a factor of bringing stability, cooperation, and very clearly progress on the path to EU for both Kosovo and Serbia. And what I like to highlight from that UN mandate is that we work also in improving lives of people here in the region. EU member states definitely closely follow the dialogue. Let's not forget they're the ones giving the mandate to the USR. Of course, political unity is important, and we saw it. There was a very clear political unity when it came to the Ohrid Agreement. And as you know, they're also following the implementation. They link that one also with the incentives such as growth plan, and of course, when obligations are not met, then they would sustain diplomatic pressure. You asked on the dialogue and connections to the EU path. Yesterday there was one notion that was quite hard to hear, a narrative about the dialogue, and I would just like to highlight the dialogue is not a burden. It's not prepared as a burden, but is a tool. It's a pathway for both Kosovo and Serbia for their path to EU. And of course, assuring citizens that we really, as EU, want them in our family.
Sure, thank you again. Now, this one I kind of feel particularly strong about. The next question is related to, and kind of there's a flow throughout all these questions. There's a notion, you don't have to agree, but there's this notion of interconnectedness between Kosovo and Serbia in terms of implementation. This idea that, you know, because the other side isn't moving, we're not moving. This sort of perpetual catch-22. So seeing how the dialogue again isn't just a vehicle for normalization, let's say mutual normalization between Kosovo and Serbia, it's also a major dimension of their relationship with the European Union. Is there validity in what the Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama recently suggested to Kosovo, perhaps applied to both sides? This idea of, let's sort of divorce this interconnectedness, this idea that if one side does its homework, implements its commitments, regardless of whether the other side does the same and to what extent, the successful side, let's say, the more constructive side, will be rewarded, for the lack of a better word, and the other side will inevitably share its pace of its share of consequences. I personally would recommend this to both sides, but is this something that would be or that is embraced by the EU, again from Brussels to the member states? Is this perhaps something that USR Sorensen is encouraging in talking to the parties to facilitate implementation?
This logic is relevant first. What it shows in a bit what you said. Yes, EU can and it does also align its work in a way that the concrete when the obligations and commitments are met, so when real work is done, it is rewarded. We cannot reward just promises and words. USR Sorensen has been calling upon both sides that they have to deliver on their own obligations and commitments under the dialogue fully, without delay and without new preconditions. Even when the other side is not so, or it's more evident. The idea is that we don't centralize the whole normalization process only towards the one final comprehensive agreement, because many parts can be and should move forward independently, and they can be done already now. No one needs to wait for another side. Of course, there's the risk that if one, for example, move in isolation, that we would have imbalanced implementation or backlash. Here is the crucial role of the USR and the dialogue to guide, to facilitate the dialogue, and of course to have the diplomatic follow-up. So we cannot also not imagine Kosovo and Serbia being in the EU without normalizing their relations. So it means, someone said yesterday, and today it was said, we cannot change the history. Also, we cannot, change our neighbors. And as all of the EU member states, we know, like relations with your neighboring countries are always more complex, for sure. So EU dialogue is for both, and also an exercise how being in the EU works. It's about dialogue, it's compromise, so and that's a difficult work for all.
It is true, but definitely the kind of success of the dialogue we all hope for the full-out success of the dialogue and full implementation of both sides, but it's true that it cannot be measured just in terms of the process itself. I think it's an important dimension to measure it by the actions of both sides, and to kind of have policies in accordance with these actions, in addition to the overall success of the dialogue. But back to the core of our topic, the narratives. We've seen a clear connection between, let's say, the fall in the commitment, or the fall in the rhythm of the dialogue, and the rise in divisive, harsh, inflammatory, even toxic narratives. We understand this goes beyond the mandate of the USR, who naturally cannot dictate what is stated and what is sort of featured in our local media. Nevertheless, speaking again about the totality of the EU from Brussels to the member state capitals, is there still something, is there anything that can be done to address or to alleviate this problem? Associated questions would be, is the EU present enough in our public space, beyond talking to the governments, and can the EU messages be to our public, can be louder, can they be clearer, and so forth?
Indeed, we do see more divisive rhetoric, inflamed public narratives, polarization, unfortunately, all over the world. This can, in fact, undermine trust. Trust building is very much important. Of course, it makes compromises politically very difficult and costly. And yes, courageous leadership is then also missing out. EU wants to be present and visible. Also, USR and his office, we are striving for more engagement with civil society, with think tanks. We are always looking for more support, in fact, based reconciliation narratives. And you ask what could be done differently. Here we absolutely see the role of the media and the think tanks and civil society to promote balanced narratives, amplify voices of reasons and compromise, and to hold political actors accountable.
Great, it's a good segue into the next question, but for example, the figures you presented in your first answers are pretty impressive, and that's something that should be widely known in our media and our general publics. And yeah, and it is true that partly is the role of civil society and media themselves. It seems to us that civil society in this sort of crisis years is the only actor that is with a continuous clear commitment to normalization. So what more can civil society do to help on kind of any areas covered so far, or anything else to help in general? And maybe, because we're coming to an end, where you might want to link this with your, let's say, final key key message to our governments, to our people, to our civil society, and to our media? Why should we engage in and support the dialogue?
Civil society is absolutely vital for sustaining the dialogue and continuing and basically countering negative narratives. What we can see also in other post-conflict places, the civil society is the one that brings together the communities. This event, for example, is exactly this case. You asked what would be the role of civil society. We see here, I see here 3 points: advocacy, public engagement, and monitoring. Civil society organizations can pressure political actors, so they honor their commitments and they don't forget on the obligations, push for implementation in that sense, and as I said before, the accountability is very important. With public engagement, facilitating public debates as today, education and communication campaigns, the society can strengthen public ownership of the normalization process, and with monitoring, you can act as a watchdogs, meaning tracking the implementation of agreements, reporting back to the EU and international community, ensuring transparency. Some of the key messages to the politicians: dialogue is not optional; it's central to the EU for the EU future. But as I said before, it's a path. It's not a burden. It's kind of helping too. What is needed? It's boldness, compromises, trust building, and commitments. Those are not just diplomatic virtues, but strategic necessities and decisions. Media, the role is not secondary. Stories that media journalists tell do shape public perspectives, choose depth, fact-finding, fact-based reporting, and constructive narratives. And again, to the civil society, your engagement, you are the spine of the reconciliation. Building trust, holding, again, what I said already twice, governments accountable, and keeping public informed. For citizens, I know this one may be a bit hard to hear, but engage, support, and this part, be patient. Normalization, it's not a fast track. There's no fast track for normalization. We can hear from also just a month ago from Belfast, it took 40 years. I'm coming from Slovenia, comparing, for example, our how we arranged questions around the border with Italy. It took us 30 years. Unfortunately, that's for the normalization and reconciliation, time, trust is needed. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel for sure, meaning that this patience will bring a better future and stability, and of course EU integration. Maybe just to wrap up. Yes, times are challenging, but some of the challenges we discussed before make dialogue even more important in this time. When we talk about the dialogue, it's also important to see it, not to look for just the signing and the meetings that was said before. Also, the perfectionism, it won't work. what will work is persistence, credible implementation, and commitment of all stakeholders. We are all in the same boat, meaning EU, both the governments, politicians, civil society, and of course, people.
So, you know, it's an easy one, I guess. Patience is easy for us in the Balkans. We strive for greatness and perfection, so, you know, sometimes we lack a bit of patience, but we'll try. Thank you again for doing this. Thanks for coming to the summit, to Pristina especially for this. Much appreciated. So yeah, this kind of brings us to the end of the panel. That's the bad news. And the good news is that we're going to have a coffee break now for about 15 minutes, and see you soon for the continuation. Thank you so much for this.